Okay. Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone attending the Planning Committee meeting today, especially those in the public gallery, and anyone watching the meeting via the webcast. To the members of public in the gallery, I would like to remind you that this planning meeting is being broadcast live over the internet, and there is no need for any other filming of the meeting to take place. This meeting is available to view online now and in the future. Committee members, please be aware that we are all on camera and you may be visible on screen when people around you are speaking. And please remember to speak clearly into your microphones. We welcome the use of the Welsh language at meetings. I have had no request for people to speak Welsh today, so this meeting will be conducted in English only. Please can all mobile phones and other noisy devices be put on silent. If there is an emergency alarm, please follow the green signs and go to the ground floor of the Civic car park. Thank you. I'll ask the officers now to introduce themselves as usual, starting with my far right.
Hello, I'm Polly Ellis. I'm a solicitor for the council.
I'm Rachel Beale from Democratic Services.
Hello, I'm Richard Lewis, Head of Planning and Development. Paul Wielden, Group Leader, Highway Development Control.
Norman Jones, Team Leader, Applications.
Claire Hall, Senior Planner, Development Management.
Craig Meads, Senior Planning and Planning Policy Team.
Helen Smith, Principal Planner, Development Management.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome now Councillor Gwyn Jenkins to the committee. It's his first meeting. Welcome, Gwyn. And we'll start the agenda. Item 1, attendance and apologies. Are there any apologies, Rachel?
I haven't received any apologies for today.
Thank you.
Chair, if I can just say, Councillor Shepherd is running late, that's all. She is coming, but she's running late.
She is coming. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Polly, please.
Firstly, can I remind members that you need to complete the declaration of interest form in the attendance register folder if you're declaring an interest in any application. The following interests have been declared to me. Councillors Norma Parish, Councillor Gaynor James and Councillors Richard Overton declare a personal non-prejudicial interest in agenda items 4, 6, 7 and 8 as members of Pontypool Community Council, which has been previously consulted on the application or in the case of agenda item 4, the appeal. In the case of agenda item 9, Councillors Stuart Ashley and Councillor Faye Jones declare a personal non-prejudicial interest as members of Cwmbran Community Council, which has been consulted on the application. And I understand in relation to agenda item 7, Councillor Ron Burnett wishes to make a declaration.
Yes, thank you, Polly. Yeah, I declare personal prejudicial on 18/P/0560/FUL and for the Skewfields, as I have a close family member that has a business in the Griffithstown High Street, and I feel that I couldn't sit on this as this application will be very detrimental to the businesses in Griffithstown.
And just to note that Councillor Burnett will leave the chamber prior to the application being debated, and he won't take any part in the debate or a decision.
Thank you. Item 3, minutes of the planning meeting held on Tuesday 13th of November. Are they a true record? Somebody move? Seconded? Thank you. Are there any questions or comments on those minutes? No? So we all agree? Thank you. Item 4. Planning application 3/P/09336, and this is an appeal, as you can see by the report, and Norman Jones will explain this to committee. Thank you, Norman.
Thank you, Chair. Members may recall the refusal in April 2017 for the reclamation works at Entis Cut and the proposal to reclaim the Pennant sandstone from there over a 20-year period. The application was refused by Planning Committee due to the impact on the ancient woodland, which is, you can see the access road there, which is would be necessary to create the haul road to take the aggregate to the highway and then onto the A472. The appeal is the subject of a public inquiry, which is due to commence on the 15th of January. And the reason we come into Planning Committee is that, as with all appeals, we as an authority are required to engage with the appellants in terms of either conditions and or Section 106 agreements. Often these take the case of it being a unilateral undertaking. However, in this case, the Section 106 agreement will require the Council to be a party to it, because it requires positive action, and in the main, it's in relation to the potential restoration scheme that should the developer default, then the Council would have powers to go in and carry out the restoration scheme. So those restoration works would be costed up into a Section 106 agreement, and the proposed heads of terms would deal with potentially deal with all the issues that are included within the report and which I've laid out there. There is a slight difference, but it would deal with restoration, bonding and council step-in rights. The same for woodland management and any other matters, including vehicle routing from the site. That is on the assumption that the appeal would be allowed. We are at the moment preparing our evidence to fight this appeal and maintain the Council's decision. As it says in the report, the Section 106 will be the subject of scrutiny at the inquiry, and the decision would go to Welsh Ministers for the final decision. So we're coming to you to authorise us as officers to complete and negotiate this Section 106 agreement covering those matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Norman. Are there any questions, Stuart?
Pardon this point of information as much as anything. I thought the point of Section 106 money generally was to use for community use. I didn't realise it was used for this purpose. I wondered whether, if it's going to despoil our land, and I use that word advisedly, it was subject to something more like compensation rather than anything. Can you advise me as to this, please? Because this does seem a strange use of 106 money.
I think I turned it off. In terms of restoration schemes such as open cast, and in this case it was a former open cast site, it wasn't reclaimed, so we have to be certain that there is enough money available which the developer would place into account, and that should be enough money whereby the authority, in the case of default, could go in and carry out the works. So it is relevant to the proposal, and it is a proper use of Section 106.
So in effect, what we're looking at, if by any chance this does happen, it's a form of compensation, is what you're saying?
It would allow us to go in and release the funds that are placed in a bond and carry out those works in default.
And pardon me, Chair, your indulgence, it wouldn't be anything that takes away from any other of our 106 money?
No, it would be worked out specifically for this scheme. So the matters would be covered in individual schedules within the 106 agreement. You've got a woodland management funding, the proposal, and then the restoration bond for the works at the actual cut would be the subject of another schedule.
Are there any other questions or comments? Gwyn?
The only thing concerns me is that on about this bond, now there's been sites all over South Wales where there's been open casting and it's never been rectified after, as we're more aware of. So I think they should make sure that the money is in hand, because there's been a lot of problems in South Wales. My second point is that if I can help you in any way, I've got a vast amount of material, of photographs I've taken, aerial photographs. I visited that site for about the last 35 years. It's my pleasure.
Thank you. In relation to the point that Councillor Jenkins has made, that is quite common, and we will be seeking a Section 106 agreement that has got a robust costing arrangement to ensure that the funds are in place. And I think we have experience of this dealing with a planning appeal at the Vartig a few years back, where that appeal was eventually dismissed, and one of the reasons for that was that the Welsh Minister wasn't satisfied with the bonding arrangements that were made in the Section 106 agreement. We're aware of that. We will be making that point to the inspector, and certainly the appellants should be aware of that, because it's the same appellant.
Stuart again.
Unless anybody's got any other questions, I'd like to move it. But I have a word for more words I'd like to. I'm not happy with it, but I understand it's prudent. That's the right word. And I understand the officer's reasons for bringing it, so I'd like to move it. I'm very careful with my choice of words there.
Okay, thank you for that, Stuart. Is there a second?
No, we haven't.
You seconded?
Just make one more point.
Yes,
just
you
build
can.
on what Stuart said. We, as a council, by endorsing what you're saying here, are not endorsing that the company is going in and starting to work this site. I think, knowing members as I do, I'm sure that we would want to convey our sense of rejection to this proposal. What I'm voting for here is your management of this fight against the appeal.
Yeah, absolutely. The discussions around the Section 106 and that agreement is without prejudice to our case, which is to defend the reason for refusal.
Thank you, Jason, by the way.
You want to come in, Polly?
Can I just reassure members that it is a purely procedural matter, and it's putting the council in the best possible situation it could be in the event that the appeal was won by the developer. So that's why we're doing it in this particular way. Okay.
Thank you for that. Right, we've had it moved and seconded. Can I have a show of hands, please, for approval? I think that's unanimous. Anyone against? Abstentions? No, that was unanimous. Thank you, members. Item 5. This is another appeal. The site address is 18 Ashley Court, Hentless. Richard Lewis, I think you want to come in on this. Thank you.
No, I don't need to come in. It's just for information. It's about an appeal that was won concerning an oak tree. But if members have any questions, happy to answer them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Right. You move. It's for information only. Thank you. Show of hands, please. Thank you. That's unanimous. Item 6, which is application number 18/P/0476 FUL, retention of use of the property for temporary accommodation for individuals under the Housing Wales Act 2014, maximum of 4 people to reside at the property at one time, and the site address is 14 Conway Road, Pontypool, Torfaen, and Mrs Claire Hall is going to give us a short presentation. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Chair. No updates to the report. This is the application site. It's an end of terrace property. That's the primary school and the grounds to the rear. This is the layout plans. There's no physical alterations to the building. It's a 3-storey building. So there's a ground floor, first floor and a second floor accommodation. And this is some photographs of the site. As you see, it's a 3-storey building. Terrace properties on either side, and the gated access to the side of the building, providing access to the rear of the school. Its recommendation is for a temporary 2-year permission.
Thank you, Claire. Any questions or comments, Alan?
Yeah, thanks, Claire. What I don't understand about this is it seems to have been refused a number of times for either a house of multiple occupation or indeed for change of use to a hostel, and yet it's been refused. And yet today we're being asked to accept it. And I don't really know what's different.
The short answer is that it's a Torfaen managed arrangement is the difference. The previous applications were by the landowner in a private capacity. The current proposal is related to our colleagues in the housing department and the service that they provide for residents in the borough who need that support on a temporary basis to get them back on their feet. And I think the confusion seems to have been because it's a council managed operation, they're exempt from HMO licence regulations under the Environmental Health and Housing Act, and I think in that process they hadn't maybe appreciated that the requirement for planning permission is entirely separate to that process, which is why the application is with us to regularise that situation. But because of the planning history and the obvious physical constraints of the site, officers, we couldn't support an unfettered a permanent planning permission, but given the housing department have a short-term arrangement, we feel that we can grant a temporary permission on that basis, but on that basis only subject to the conditions which are very tightly controlled and only apply because the council is running service effectively.
You want to come back in, Alan?
Yes, please, Chair. Thank you. My fear is that when this short-term lease, which is 3 years after all, and it's almost a year, been running almost a year already, when it expires, the householder or the landowner is going to come back and expect his planning application to succeed, because it would have already been used, that building would have already been used as a hostel for 3 years. Aren't we setting a sort of dangerous precedent, given the fact that we've refused it, 4 times already?
I think you're right in that regard. In terms of expectations from the landowner, who knows what they might want to do in the future, but the conditions that are recommended would mean that the permission would only inure with the tenancy arrangement for the council, and the planning permission would cease upon that period of time when that tenancy is no longer in place. So the material considerations this time are the nature of the use and the fact that it's the housing department managing it. I think from a highway, I'm sure Paul can come in, but from a highway point of view, we felt that there's a less likelihood for these individuals to be in a position where they would be adding to that car owning pressure, if you like, given the circumstances, the particular need that's being met in this case. That on balance we felt that we could approve it on a temporary basis. But you're right, we don't know what the landowner's expectations would be, but the planning permission would not endure for him and he would have to reapply, which he's obviously tried to do in the past.
Right. The Highways Officer, do you want to come in? Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, Councillor, as you noted there, that on a number of occasions previously, from as far back as 2008, we've opposed the application from a highway standpoint. They were applications to turn the properties into separate flats that weren't controlled by the housing department. In this instance, and we were minded to sort of what we've said before, and we wanted, for the sake of consistency, to say exactly what we've said before. But notwithstanding that, the Clare did clarify that this was owned by the housing department. There was a strong likelihood of the people that were using that facility that wouldn't have cars, and it was for a limited period of 2 years. Like you said, is how do you control, or how can you control that in the future when they come back with a revised application in 2 years' time? I mean, we would look at that application then, and if it was back for an application for 3 separate flats owned by a private landlord, the likelihood is that we would object to it, as we've previously objected to it. So that there was a balance to be struck here, and the balance was that it's owned by the housing department, and that the people there are very unlikely to have cars.
Thank you. Lenny, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Just to check, definitions definitely going back into 12th of December 2020. Correct? Yeah, that's the first question. And would there be any chance of the council keeping it on after that date?
I don't know whether you can answer that.
The temporary permission date coincides with the expiry of the current lease that the housing department are working to. We don't know how the housing department would want to do at that point, but given the issues that they've had from a planning point of view, that they would have to look at that time as to whether they wanted to continue the use at that time, in which case a further application to us would be necessary, or whether they're happy to just surrender it at that point and find an alternative location to deliver the service that they're providing.
Thank you. Okay, Lenny, with that? Right. We got Ronnie next.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Claire. I'm just looking at it now, as you see, it is in a residential area, and it's changed use from residential to hostel. One of my main concerns is the health and well-being of the neighbours around. Who is responsible for it, and who will be monitoring it? As I say, up to 4 persons. Again, I know everybody has to have a roof over their head, but I just think the situation that was happened once before, when something like this came up, it wasn't very pleasant for all the neighbours around there when there was a lot of trouble there. So who is actually going to be responsible for monitoring and the health and well-being for the neighbours around there?
Claire? Thank you, Councillor. Housing is the short answer. I mean, if you look, it's towards the bottom end of page 29 and the top of page 30 on my report. They've got very strict licence arrangements. So once they've got a lease with the landowner as a department, they have individual leasing and licensing arrangements with the individuals who go there. They go through a very strict vetting procedure before they're allocated a space, and that's monitored and managed from their point of view. I think what I would say in terms of the impact on neighbours, they have been there for almost a year, and the only incidences are 1 or 2 which have been highlighted in the report. And I think it maybe is an awareness now from residents that they now know it's the housing department that they would need to go to if in the unfortunate event something else occurred, but that there are measures in place under the housing legislation, so it would fall to them to monitor it on a daily basis. From a planning point of view, it's only to monitor the compliance with the conditions to make sure that there's no more than 4 persons in there at any one time, and that it's only Torvine operating it, and that they cease in December 2020. If they wanted to continue beyond that point, we would expect them to come back with an application in advance of that date, so they don't have the disruption of their one permission finishing, them having to turf everybody out, and then having to go through again. So I would expect in advance of December 2020 to know whether housing would want to continue with that or not.
Right. Jason, then Steve.
Thank you, Chair. Given that the last application was rejected and there's been no physical changes considered on this application, we're almost in danger of saying it's one rule for somebody else and another rule for Torfaen. And I think that's a very dangerous message to send out. So I have to admit, I'm minded before we get to the vote to decline on that basis.
Right. Richard, you want to come in on that?
Just going to say, I understand what you're saying, but because this is a very specific use, and housing have made it very clear it's a very specific use, it wouldn't, a private individual wouldn't have that sort of use anyway. It would be uncontrolled. And because it's so specific, and we have, thought about this long and hard, it is a facility that's necessary, and we felt that with the tight controls that we have put in on it, and bearing in mind that it's a council running it, and that there is an opportunity for people to complain to the council, whereas it's not as easy to complain to a private landlord, that those measures are in place and they satisfy us that we can determine on a positive basis for a maximum period of time. If after that period they would want to continue the use, then that would have to come back to committee, and obviously any issues that may have arisen would be reported at that time. But it's a subtle difference, I appreciate that, but we feel, because there is a difference, and because we are making it personal to the council so that nobody else could exercise that permission, it's enough of a safeguard. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. We've got Steve next.
Thanks, Chair. My question is, with the history of this site, the Housing Department have been using this site since January 2018. And now they're looking to have an application through us. They've been using it for virtually nearly a year. Why now? Why not before the scheme starts?
Richard, please.
I think Claire explained at the beginning that they weren't aware that it needed permission. They thought that it was simply a residential use. When they did find out, we acted and the Housing Department submitted an application. So I think it was simply a mistake that they didn't realise it needed planning permission.
They're accountable in the Department of Torfaen. Why aren't they talking to yourselves to find out what they should be doing?
I can't answer that, but we have been talking to them now, and I think that they understand the reasoning behind the planning permission. As I said, they have acted accordingly as soon as they found that out.
Thank you. Louise?
I just wanted to reiterate really what Jason said, is we can't really have one rule for one and not the other. And also, is it cost effective for Torfaen Housing for 4 people? Are we paying for the running costs? Obviously, if you're going to have complaints, there's going to be officers dealing with it for 4 people. But going back to what Jason said, I don't think we can start setting a precedent. If a personal, who can say that a personal, the landlord is not going to provide just as good a service as Torfaen Housing would? How could we refuse them and go back and say Torfaen can?
Well, Richard's already answered that. Pardon? Yeah. Richard will come back in.
In terms of affordable, that's not something that it wouldn't be in our remit to look at that. That would be in the Housing Department's remit. They obviously feel that it is cost effective, but I couldn't answer for them on that basis.
Okay, Louise. Faye next. No, Stuart next. Then Faye.
Yeah, I was just trying to get my head around why we're giving planning permission. It's because we got 4 individuals in 4 lots of accommodation, whereas they lived in single accommodation as 4 individuals, they wouldn't need planning permission. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah. It all comes down to the definitions within the planning legislation. The critical reference is living together as a single household. Don't have to be related to people, but if you live together as a single household, students do it, for example, that sort of thing. These individuals are not living together as a single household, so they don't benefit from the authorised use of the building is as a C3 residential dwelling. So if a family moved in, they would benefit under that existing planning lawful use. Similarly, a group of individuals living together as a household could benefit from the existing lawful use of the building. The use that is currently being used there, those individuals do not live together. They're very much independent of each other, and they're managed individually or as couples, depending on who's in at the time. But it's that lack of being a single household that means it is effectively a hostel from a planning point of view. The confusion appears to have arisen. It's because Torfaen manage the service, it makes them exempt as a house of multiple occupation under the housing/environmental health licensing arrangements, but that doesn't apply in planning.
The reason I ask that is because we have a few of these in my particular location, I won't say ward, and it's concern because of you turned it down as a private landlord. Why is Torfaen allowed to do it? I know we have housing need and we have need for this type of accommodation. Now, I think there's a lot of disbelief about this, and members are perplexed about this, and I think quite rightly so. We do one under one form of tenure, and then approve it under another. Why is that?
Claire, can you answer? Richard's going to answer it.
Well, I think it's obviously it's certainly a member's decision. Members have to look at this, and just to repeat what I've said, I can see that there's a difference between an ordinary landlord doing this and what the council are specifically doing. The main reason for the refusal last time was we couldn't guarantee that people wouldn't have cars, whereas on this particular occasion, the people that will be occupying these properties are unlikely to own cars. And on that basis, Paul has not objected to it. And the only the controls that we are going to put in, that we wouldn't be able to put in to a private individual, is to control it to the council using it only, and obviously a short term. Beyond that, I can't really offer any other assurances except that we have looked at them very carefully, and I can see as a planning officer differences between the two. If it comes up for renewal, it'll come back to committee to make that decision. Sorry.
The only constraint really between a private individual is the number of cars.
In this particular case, you've got the council controlling it, and they've got specific people going into these accommodations. It's there for one purpose, and that's to deal with homeless people, basically. And that's a specific use, and we are specifically permitting it for that use. That's the difference, I think. Yeah.
Thank you. Faye, next.
I just wondered, from a safeguarding point of view, is the information of the type of household it is shared with the head teacher of the school?
I wouldn't know the answer to that. I mean, the school and education were consulted on the planning application. They have in the past been involved and made representations. We've not had anything this time around. So from a planning point of view, I don't know. But from a housing point of view, I don't know what steps they have to do as part of that. You know, they're exercising the statutory function in the same way I am. I don't know what steps they have to go through as part of that. But from a planning point of view, the school has been consulted on applications affecting this property, both previously and in relation to the current one.
Thank you.
Right, we've got Jason next, then Janet.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Given that we've been working with social landlords in this committee to identify properties in our wards that could be used for redevelopment for social housing, this strikes me as an ideal opportunity for one of those projects. I think the Torfaen housing team could benefit from the fact that a Bronavon or a Melon or somebody of that nature could spend some money in redesigning this to meet specifically the needs of planning and members' concerns here today, and probably do a better job than maybe we've seen now.
Claire?
Oh, sorry, I have to come back to that. I mean, the reason the previous applications on this site have been refused is because the site has no access or parking facilities. The access to the side of the property is effectively no man's land. We don't know who owns it, if anyone owns it. So there is nothing that another person could come in and do to make that situation any better from a physical point of view. Planning's not concerned with internal layouts really anyway, it's just the use of the property and how that manifests itself in land use terms. The site is constrained. You know, I think the expectation is that there is no parking, that no parking can be provided to that site. And like I said, the only reason we're considering a permission at all is because this specific statutory function that the housing department is doing here in terms of the situation these individuals find themselves means as planners we feel that they're unlikely to be adding to that car parking problem, and that's balanced against if a normal family of 4 or 5 moved in, they would probably generate, if anything, more car parking demand than the current use is doing. And it's on that, it is a balance, but it's very specific to the housing function that is being discharged here.
Thank you, Claire. Janet now. Yeah, you haven't got your mic.
I said, what happens if we dismiss or turn down this application? Are those residents already living there going to become homeless again and then dependent on Torfaen for provide housing for them? I think it's a bit of a no-brainer, isn't it?
Richard, answer that.
Yeah, I can answer that. I don't know what would happen, but yeah, I think the council would have a responsibility to rehouse them elsewhere, I guess. Whether that's possible or not, I don't know.
Therefore, we would be, trying to go back on something which we had tried in council. We've tried in social housing. If we turn this down, we're just adding to that, call for housing for these people. So I really think that I don't think that under these conditions we have any choice but to recommend with the approval and the conditions set out by your officers.
Right. Is that a motion?
I propose that we go with the recommendations by our officers. These conditions go up to December 2020, and then if anything comes along, we'll take it in course.
I second that.
Right, it's been seconded. Yeah, hang on a minute. We've got Louise. No, the motion's been passed and seconded, but if Louise wants to come in, and then you can come in after Stuart.
Well, what I was going to say is obviously we've stated there is no parking. Is how can we determine that a homeless person hasn't got a car? Not all homeless people have come from being on a street corner with no housing. They could be a young lad that's fallen out with his parents and he's homeless and he's been sleeping on sofas, but they can have cars, so there's 4 extra cars, so it's unfair to say that there is not going to be any extra strain on highways.
So I think that's highly unlikely. All the homeless people I've known do not own cars. I mean, we don't know that, Louise, but I would think they would not have cars.
I think this implication of cars as somebody that doesn't drive, personally, is a very good use of a property, if you turn it on its head, that doesn't have parking. And there are a lot of developments going on at the moment without it. If we've got a homelessness problem, we've got a property which is not much use because of the other problems, it's actually a damn good use of a property. Turn it on its head. The obsession with cars, and this is where I do go off the deep end sometimes, is I don't care whether they've got cars or not. The problem is the people haven't got somewhere to live. That's the important thing. Janet put it beautifully just now, I thought. And the problem is they haven't got somewhere to live. And we're seeing people out in tents around our community, even in this community. And I think that's alarming. So if we've got an opportunity, and it seems it is one, it's a temporary one, I just think we go with that and stop mucking around with this. I'll take the proposal and go with it.
Right, thank you for that, Stuart. Right, we've had a motion, it's been seconded. We go to the officer's recommendation. We have a show of hands, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Are there any abstentions? No? So it was 8 for, 7 against, so this planning application has been approved. Thank you. Right, agenda item 7. Planning application. Oh, yes, Louise.
Sorry for being late. Obviously, I missed declaration of interest. I need to declare personal and prejudicial. So I own a shop in Pontypool Town Centre, so whatever the outcome of the planning application could be detrimental for the future use of the shop. So I need to leave.
Thank you, Louise. Yeah. Right, sorry for the hold-up. Members needed some advice, legal advice, and yeah, Councillor Burnett has left too. Right, I go to item 7, application number 18/P/0560 FUL, proposal erection of a Class A1 food store, approximately 1,804 square metre gross floor area, associated access and car parking and landscaping, together with a replacement car park for the existing industrial building, the site at former Trico School Fields roundabout Pontypool. Mrs Claire Hall again is going to present this to us. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Chair. 2 things to update to the report. Firstly, you'll see in the report reference to Planning Policy Wales Edition 9. As of last Wednesday, the 5th of December, that was replaced by Planning Policy Wales Edition 10. So the references for Edition 9 are no longer applicable. What I would say is the substance of Welsh Government policy hasn't changed, although the wording and the paragraphs and the layout are all different. There's an entire chapter called Retail and Commercial Development, which reiterates that major generators of travel demand, which includes retailing, should be located within existing urban centres or areas where they can be easily reached by walking or cycling or well served by public transport. The 3 tests for retail development outside of town centres is of need, sequential and impact remain unchanged, and Welsh Government have reiterated the town centre's first policy. PPW10 is more about placemaking and well-being, etc., so it's just reiterating that existing urban centres, well served by various modes of travel, are the preferred option for retail development. The other item to update members is Brando Cymru, which is the Canal and River Trust in Wales, have objected to the proposal on the basis of insufficient flood risk and consequence information of the proposal, and they have requested that the application should not be positively determined until the discussions between the Trust, the Local Planning Authority and the applicants with regard to the need for flood mitigation works have been completed and the mechanism and timing of any such provision deemed necessary have been agreed. The site is a car park serving an existing industrial development. We all know this as the McDonald's roundabout or other colloquial variations of that. This is the two trunk roads. Welsh Government control this one. Torfaen Highways control that A road there. Sorry, it's turned over on its side from the previous screen. But these are the existing industrial developments here, and they're proposing, there's the car park at the moment, and they're proposing the new retail store and car parking here, and replacement car parking on the green space to the front of the existing buildings. The Aldi store is single storey, glazed to the public frontages, located in the corner. There's an existing tree belt, obviously, along the boundary to the main roads. The rear, the warehousing element, like I said, the public sort of face is more glazed. And this is the store. This is a plan that the applicants have submitted in terms of its relationship with neighbouring areas. So Pontypool Town Centre is here, Griffithstown here, New Inn here. So they're showing various public transport nodes and opportunities for pedestrian linkages, which are all set out in the report. Again, just some photographs of the site. Members may recall doing a site visit at the time of the previous application. The site circumstances haven't changed since that time. There's the existing car park. There's a bund between the car park and the existing rugby playing fields. And these are the main changes, really. So this time last year, there were 4 reasons for refusal of the application: retail impact on Pontypool Town Centre, the sequential test, that has fallen away this time around, impact on industrial land use and it being an unsustainable location, not well served by non-car modes of travel. So in the report, but not a specific reason for refusal in 2017, there were concerns regard to traffic impact on the trunk network and the flood consequences impact assessment, both of which required further work to be undertaken by the developer. That was contained in the report last time round. The work on the traffic Welsh Government issue appears to have been completed to their satisfaction. The impact in terms of flood risk and mitigation has not. The retail need and impact assessment figures in the report, as today, as it was then, are based on a 2010 survey of 1,000 individuals. One of the concerns at the last application was the lack of an up-to-date survey. The applicants have undertaken a 2018 survey of 43 people and submitted those results for us to consider as part of this application. This is a critical one from my point of view. There's been no material change in national or local planning policy since the previous refusal of the application in last December. The retail need and impact assessment is exactly the same as it was then. The developer has undertaken further work in respect of the traffic impact, that Welsh Government no longer are objecting on that basis, but Canal and River Trust still are. So this time there are still 4 reasons for refusal, but they are slightly different. The sequential test has fallen away because, as you'll see in the report, it's been reluctantly accepted based on the outline application from the Mylard that it wouldn't accommodate a store of this size. So we've accepted that the sequential argument has fallen away, but because the flood risk issue had not been resolved since that time, we've put that on as a reason for refusal, which we would have done last time had we not appreciated the additional cost to the developer of doing that, so we gave them the warning last time around.
Thank you, Claire. Before we open it up, we have speakers for this application. Mr. Russell Davis, objector. Would you like to come down? He's not here? No. So that means the applicant cannot speak now, because there's nothing to answer to. So the only thing I can do is open it up to the floor for questions. Janet?
It's been commented that this site would not be suitable for people who didn't have vehicles. What about the local bus companies? Would they not be able to offer like a little shopper, you know?
Highways Officer Paul will answer that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It's very difficult to get local bus companies into sites like this because they have to completely change their route generally. Subsidies do assist, but it's awful difficult when this is not on a main sort of internal bus route. The developer has offered a contribution towards community transport, which I would welcome, but that still doesn't make the site that better in terms of public transport.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Jason now.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There's a couple of terms I just wonder if you could expand on. The term unsustainable location is something that you mentioned was to do with travel in and out of the site. Is that right?
Sustainable location, this coincides really with the emphasis that Welsh Government are putting on that sense of place, if you like. It's all to do with the bigger issue really in terms of reducing reliance on the car, both for climate change reasons, but also from an equality and affordability point of view as much as anything. Welsh Government have very clearly reiterated the point that they see retail and commercial centres, you know, town and neighbourhood centres, as being a sort of hub of social and economic activity, and they support a range of services to support the local community, and they're highly accessible to more than one mode of transport. Yes, you can still get them if you have a car, but you can also get to them on foot, by bike, on the bus, and quite often by train as well. So I think the main concern here, from a sustainability point of view, is that the remoteness of this site from those existing centres is both contrary to our retail strategy, which is in accordance with Welsh Government's own policy, but also it highlights the whole sustainability argument as to whether out-of-town remote locations next to trunk roads are the most suitable places for retail development.
I regard the location or proposed location of this site as actually an asset. You can get to it by bike, you can get to it on foot, get to it by car, you can get to it on canal barge if you wanted to. So when I'm looking at this, my decision would be based on the fact that I regard it as somewhere that people can get easy access to. The retail need, I think, is got to be down to the developer themselves, because they're the ones who are funding the site, aren't they? So they would be putting their money at risk of that site functioning as it should and getting the throughput through. So I'm not necessarily thinking that's a reason for refusal. And in terms of the flooding, anecdotally, the rugby club that's been on site there for 100 years has never reported a flood on that pitch from the canal. So, as much as the Glyndŵr Trust or the Canals Agency would like more engineering work done, and I'm sure they would, I can only give you the anecdotal evidence to say that the site has never flooded, at least since 1963, and I'm sure, if not before that.
Do you want to answer that, Claire? Thank you.
Yeah, just going to come back. In terms of it being accessible by various modes of transport, the developer's own submission concedes that they expect the vast majority of their customers to arrive by car. I think there's a reality in terms of how people do bulk shopping. You may get the odd one or two that put some panniers on the bike, but the vast majority of people with supermarkets will arrive by car, load up and drive off again. In terms of the need, I have to disagree with you. It's not the developer's responsibility at all. Paragraph 4.39 of PPW 10 says that where no sites are allocated for retail in a development plan, the local planning authority should include criteria-based policies against which retail proposals are assessed. That's exactly what we've got in our adopted LDP. We have a number of criteria at which all retail development proposals are assessed because we don't have a specific allocation. There is an identified need which is recognised in the report. This is one way of meeting that need. It's not necessarily the only way of meeting the need. It's the way that the developer has chosen to meet the need. And it's our duty as a local authority, in line with Welsh Government policy, to assess that against the criteria within the policy. In terms of the rugby club, obviously the rugby club is within a floodable area. I'm not going to disagree with you. I don't know the history of the site as to if it's ever flooded in the past. I think that the difference here is that the proposed development would be bringing members of the general public to a site that is potentially at a risk of flooding. We don't think it's necessarily an insurmountable issue, but we have to show due diligence, and again, Welsh policy is that we take a precautionary approach unless we're absolutely satisfied that that risk is not there or is satisfactorily mitigated against. We should advise against bringing members of the public into that situation. Is there anything else you want to?
Yeah. Just to add, in terms of the impact, we're not concerned with the impact on Aldi's retail performance, we're concerned about the impact on Pontypool Town Centre. That's the concern, not Aldi's performance if they go there. It's the impact this store will have on the town centre, which is struggling. It has a vacancy rate above the national average. There's a potential multiple retailer. In terms of New Look, they've announced they are due to close in Pontypool, and Pontypool is struggling. And the impact identified by the council's retail consultants, in my mind, would be quite significant on Pontypool and exacerbate the decline in the town centre. And in terms of walk-in, yes, they've shown a walk-in route, but from Pontypool town centre, that's a 20-minute walk. So it's walking 20 minutes with shopping bags. It might be accessible by foot, but when you've got shopping, it's a bit of a different story.
Thank you. Just one more final point. I really believe there is an economic imperative of getting something in the north of Cwmbran. We're losing, I would say, trade in Torfaen by people going to other areas that are outside of Torfaen, especially in the Blaenau and Pontypool side. And I think Tesco probably needs that level of competition as well. We've already set a precedent by having Tesco slightly outside of the town centre. So, in my view, I think it's a beneficial application.
Sorry, Tesco's is not in and out of the town location. Tesco's is within the town centre and does facilitate those very link trips which the report refers to. People can park in Tesco's and do other bits and pieces of shopping in the town centre, which is the whole purpose of having retail stores in such locations, to facilitate a wider benefit beyond the store itself. I don't think there's any issue here in terms of Tesco is over-trading. We're not concerned about the loss of trade for Tesco's, we're concerned about the loss of trade to those smaller independent shops which rely on that footfall that Tesco's provide. Planning policy Wales, again, the new edition has reiterated paragraph 4.314 that we don't need to demonstrate need for development within defined retail and commercial centres. And it's not the role of the planning system to restrict competition between retail within those centres. So Tesco's is within a retail centre. Based on our own retail consultants' analysis, they're over-trading. It's not that loss that concerns us. It's the lack of footfall, because the trading that's lost to Tesco's is also potentially lost to those other traders within the town who benefit from Tesco's being there, somebody parking in Tesco's or visiting Tesco's and then also going to the bank or also popping into the butchers, all those incidental smaller retailers which benefit off the back of the footfall that a large retailer can bring to a town centre. When a large retailer is out of centre, those benefits are not there.
Right, thank you, Claire. Okay, now, Jason. Gaynor's next on.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to pick up on quite a few of those points there. The officers are worried about the town centre. When's the last time you went down that town centre and ticked a box of what shop would be affected?
Yeah, the report is comments from the Council's officer responsible for Pontypool Town Centre Management, who have given a list of potential retailers there that would be affected by the sale of this. In terms of that vacancy rate, I went around the town in October to count the number of vacant units, which is 17% above the national average at 13, which shows the performance. So my visit to the town centre has been recent, and the Council's own person who's in charge of Pontypool Town Centre in terms of the indoor market have provided a number of retailers in that list in her response that she feels would be impacted upon by this development, and the impact of the market, where the council spent a lot of money to bring the indoor market up to better performance, increased the number of events in there, increased the number of traders, a number of niche retailers have gone in there, and it's those very ones which we've, because the council put effort into, are the ones that are going to be impacted in the council's view by this proposal.
Well, if you like, I'd like to take you down the street from Tesco's car park. You've got Argos. You've got Farm Food, which is a specialist frozen food, which are reasonable, and people who can't drive, it's the place for them to go, because they can catch a bus right next. You've got Wilkinson's, which is nothing to do with, it won't make any difference whatsoever. Aldi's, Peacocks, are they going to affect Peacocks? No. Next door's a fish and chip shop. Then is a mobile phone shop. Then is an empty shop. And then you've got banks, you've got building societies, you've got tattoo parlours, you've got beauty salons, you've got hairdressers, you've got antique shops, and you've got Iceland that deal with the people that can't drive. They can go into Iceland, they can have their trolleys filled up, and have it delivered to the door free of charge. There is no trader in that town that will be affected by Aldi's, and that's the one point. Second point, you're calling Aldi's site out of town. It's 2 minutes down the bypass, literally 2 minutes. So, if we won't have Aldi's in the town, I call it in the town, it's 2 minutes. If we don't have Aldi's, the people of Pontypool are going to be deprived of choice of where to shop. And secondly, you'll be sending them back down the bypass, past that roundabout, into Cwmbran, because Cwmbran is Pontypool's outside retail. Everybody goes to Cwmbran because they got choice. And if you send them, at least if Aldi's is on that roundabout, the people can come out of Aldi's, back up that bypass, 2 minutes, park into Tesco's, and go and get their hair done in the town.
Craig, you coming in?
Yeah, in terms of the impact information submitted by the applicant themselves, they've identified this as 7 to 9% impact on the town centre. So they themselves are identifying as an impact. Our retail consultants that have done surveys for the authority since 2004, 2007, 10 and 12, who know that the retail market in Torfaen is suggesting that impact is going to be larger than being suggested by Aldi's. So I think there will be an impact on it, and it's if you take that trade away from Tesco's, yes, it's over trading, but those people are doing linked trips. If you take those people out to Aldi's, they're not going to be doing that. In terms of out of centre, there's a definition in Technical Advice Note 4 from Welsh Government that identifies out of centre as being 300 metres walking distance for the town centre. That can change depending on topography and other physical barriers, but that's what's classed as out of centre, anything over 300 metres from the boundary of the town centre. So this site is out of centre. But we, as an authority, from a retail impact assessment, think there's going to be an impact, and the council's own town centre manager for Pontypool have identified in their response to you, which is in the report, a number of retailers they think are going to be impacted as well.
Thank you. Another thing, you're talking about finding it difficult for people to have walked there, and that's why it was one of the refusals last time. You can walk to go and get a McDonald's. You can walk to get a KFC. You can walk to go to the harvester. You've got to use a car. And I don't think there's many people would want to walk to Aldi's to carry 10 bags of shopping home. And another thing, adjacent to Aldi's is the Westmont Rugby Football Club. The access into their grounds, absolutely appalling. And by Aldi's being there, that would help them get better access into the grounds. And also, The rugby club have got no changing rooms. They've got to go walk down to Pilks to go to the changing rooms and walk back up to that pitch. And Aldi's would support them on getting those changing rooms built.
Craig, which one want to answer?
Okay. With regard to the access for the rugby club, as you'll see in the report, it is on page, there's a penultimate paragraph on page 81. Yes, the developers have proposed an access for the rugby club as part of this development, but there's no planning reason for that from a planning policy point of view. It's not necessary for the development to go ahead. It is a nice thing to have, but similarly, any development of that car park could facilitate that access as part of its layout. It's not solely linked to retail. The existing use of the site is industrial land. There is a policy in the local plan that requires criteria to be met for non-industrial development to go on industrial land. We don't think the applicants have satisfied the criteria that allows us to set aside that land for development. The report references that there is demand in the local area for businesses who want to move to Skewfields, who want to expand their businesses at Skewfields, and it's not entirely without thought that any development of that land, industrial or retail, could facilitate an access to Westmorland Rugby Club. The report's quite clearly stated that yes, access for the rugby club is something that is very much welcome from a community benefit point of view, but it's of very little weight in the consideration of this application because there is no planning policy reason for it, and it is something that would be an added benefit as part of a development proposal. Our concern is that it's being used to justify a retail development which is contrary to policies within the local plan, both in terms of the location of retail development, but also significantly in relation to the loss of industrial land to other planning land uses.
Well, I probably would suggest that if you were thinking there's going to be different industry on there, you'd probably be waiting 20 years for somebody to move in there. And all I'm going to say is now is if this is refused, you are depriving the people of Pontypool of choice of where to shop.
Right. Pardon? Okay. You want to come in now, Paul, the Highways Officer would like to...
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's basically in relation to the issue you raised about the McDonald's side and the service station, which are over the other side of the roundabout to the proposed Aldi development. You heard about the sustainability arguments and the footways into the site and into the development, and they all approach on the side of the development. One of the real big concerns I've got is that the McDonald's site was developed as a service station. So therefore you've got a petrol filling station there, you've got the McDonald's site, you've got KFC. That is actually a site that was designed for people that are in vehicles to stop, to service and to get food and to do that. This Aldi's site isn't like that. The one big issue that I've got is people that would actually cross from the hotel development and the service station side and want to go to Aldi's, where they have to cross the lanes of the dual carriageway, the A4042, where there has been a significant accident record. So it wasn't just bringing these people in from the same side of the development, it was what happens to these other people in this island development that is in the middle of a roundabout A4042 trunk road complex, and it's bringing those people from that side of the service station and the hotel that may want to shop in the Aldi site. So that was one of my main concerns that I highlighted within the report, notwithstanding all the other issues that were raised about sustainability and Welsh Government policy and looking at all modes of transport, i.e. car, cycle and footway. This was a concern about people actually crossing the A4042 where there are no crossing facilities, where there is a high incidence of accident records to get to Aldi's from that McDonald's side. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do you want to come in, Richard? You don't want to come in now. Right, on the next member to speak is Richard. Do you want to come in, Richard?
To tell you the truth, Madam Chairman, I think that Highways have just spoken on the topic. I wish to raise a question, but I will raise it just for clarification. The paragraph on page 78, highway safety. We know that there are future plans from the Welsh Government to reconfigure the roundabout to make it safer, and the Welsh Government wished a holding order be placed on this application until that was completed, but the applicant has now indicated that they're going to erect a screen, a visibility screen that should reduce accidents. And my question is, has this proposal affected our highways evaluation in any way, as the Welsh Government have withdrawn their desire for the application to be held until improvements are completed?
Thank you. Over to the Highways Officer again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Overden. Within the report, Welsh Government say about the screen which is located on the northbound side, and that is the northbound approach into the A4042, which is on completely the opposite side to where people track across the A4042 and track up along they even track up along the side of the A4043 to get into Pontypool. There's a series of sheep trails around this. You can see exactly where people are walking, but this proposal, the Welsh Government proposal, doesn't cater for the issues that I raised earlier in respect of people crossing the A4042 from the McDonald's site.
Thank you, Paul.
Yep, thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. Steve is next on the list.
My question is, we're looking at the traffic coming in, what will the traffic going out? Because on page 66, there's an assessment about 80-ton big heavy machinery and HGVs coming through the site. Now, being a driver myself, there is going to be severe complications with cars and trucks meeting to come in and out. So what's the proposal for that?
Highways Officer again, please.
Thank you, Chair. I share your concerns, and that sometimes happens on an industrial estate, but it's not unusual to have an industrial estate with some retail use on it. So from a highway standpoint, I note your concerns, but we didn't object to that on the basis of the mix between the industrial traffic and the traffic from the retail use.
Can I just add to that point first? I think the reference that you made on page 66 of the report has not come from our highways. That's come from an existing business who says that the introduction of a retail use and introducing the public to that site is going to seriously conflict with logistics of his existing business, and it's on that basis those comments are made. So it's not Paul's highway assessment. This is a local business that's currently operating from that site, and they have view on what a retail use and bringing the public to that site will do in terms of their business, and that brings you, from a planning point of view, brings it back to the criteria in policy EET5, which requires non-industrial uses to comply with all of the criteria in that policy, and your officers think that the application fails on that basis.
Yes.
That was the reason I raised that point, because particularly there's a business already on site, and also where these proposed car parkings are, it would be logistically a nightmare for any vehicles this big, and let me assure you it will be.
Right, we've got Neil next on the list.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to say that I'm supporting this plan application. There's something that I think a lot of people have missed on here. I believe to have an opportunity to promote tourism on the canal, which runs from Newport to Brecon and on up through Cross Keys. That canal has been there since 1796. And where I've heard about people about flooding, I've never had any history about flooding. It was good news that I heard about Westmorn Old Boys that have been playing there for 25 to 30 years after they knocked down the old council buildings in Pontymoyle. They've got no change rooms. Apparently they've got an opportunity now of having change rooms built, which would be another plus to us. But the biggest thing that I think that we should be looking for is for tourism. In the Canal Basin, there are moorings there where people coming up and down from Brecon to Newport and various holiday people, where they can moor their boats there. There's a facility there then with Aldi's to be able to serve them with whatever it is, whatever they want to do. And it's a 10-minute walk into Pontypool from Pontymoyle Basin. And with regards to competition between local supermarkets, I don't think we should be even discussing that. That's up to these people to, if they're going to have a fight and a war about chasing prices, then let that be it. We should be looking for the best possible deal that we can do for people of Torvine and Pontypool. And with regards to the traffic and what's supposed to be a nightmare, Tricos was down there for something like 10 years, working 3 shifts a day, with vehicles coming in and out continuously for those 10 years. I can never remember any major accidents or anything going on down there. So again, I would be supporting the application for Aldi's.
Which officer would like to come in first? Claire?
Yeah, just on a couple of those points. Glanjo Cymru are the charity who look after the canals. They are objecting to the development based on the potential for flood risk and insufficient information of the consequences of that. That's something that members need to take into members need to take into consideration. In terms of the point about tourism, people mooring at Basin and walking to Aldi's, yes, I can see that is something that could happen. At the moment, anybody mooring at the Basin of tourism can walk into Pontypool and get their goods that way. Again, this is introducing a competition to Pontypool Town Centre, which is the whole basis for one of the reasons for refusal in terms of the impact that has. In terms of trico and lorry movements, we are not objecting on the basis of traffic movements. Welsh Government's position on the number of vehicles to and from the trunk road network is set out in the report. Yes, there will be times of conflict in terms of peak periods, etc., but we're not raising that as an issue in this case. The highway safety reason is not to do with traffic, it's to do with the unsustainable location for non-car users. They are two different things, so we're not saying that the traffic is a problem. There are third-party representations which say that there are, but as officers we've concluded, based on Welsh Government and our own assessment, that we wouldn't raise an objection to it on those grounds. In terms of Westmorn Rugby, there's no provision for changing rooms as part of this application. The only thing that is shown is a potential means of access to the playing fields from the car park as part of the layout, which is something that's entirely voluntary on the part of the applicant, not required as part of the development from a planning point of view, and potentially something that is incompatible with the flood risk from the canal. There's an existing bund protecting the site from that flood risk. The applicant's own modelling submission shows that with the existing layout, providing that access, exposes the car park at least to a risk of flooding, which is not currently there. And then the Canal and River Trust have said further modelling work is required, and any mitigation to offset the risk needs to be worked up in more detail before that they will withdraw any objection. So potentially, the means of access that is voluntarily being offered to the developer as part of this application may fall away if it unnecessarily exposes the site to flood risk that wouldn't otherwise be there.
Thank you, Claire. Stuart's next on the list.
A couple of points. If you walk down that canal underneath that road, to actually get from Pontymoyle at present to over to that site, you have to do what Paul said and walk either across the road, which, having gone into that site, on the other side of the road is the only way of getting across, which is very undesirable. The intuitive way to get there is no intuitive way to cycle or walk down onto that site. They're going to have to, if it goes ahead, develop that walking and cycling and horse riding site. If you want any way of getting onto that site that's non-motoring, it's going to have to be developed down there. Having been down there, I know that cycling-wise how you get there. That's number one. Number two, the flood risk. Now we forget something, and last week there was a global warming conference. The flood risk is increasing. People forget that. They think the flooding potential for flooding, but what's going on over the next 10, 20 years is not static. Ask any flood expert that thing. We're getting more and more floods. And it is an issue. The Wellbeing and Future Generations Act points that out, and I'm afraid if you look at extreme weather events, whether you believe in that or not, is getting more extreme, and we've had examples of that over the last 10 years. That is why the Canal and River Trusts are putting that up. It is also what the officer there pointed out, if you actually put that in there, and I'm on the Canal Trust, and that's one of the things they do point out, that canal is very old. And some of the issues that they've had up at Lamfoist and other parts where the banks have fallen away, where it hasn't been properly maintained or needs more maintenance, there are issues with that canal bank. Like subsidence, we've got it down here further. So there are issues with that canal bank, and they'd be very prudent not to suggest that to us. Issues. I know that well. So that is why, with extreme weather and the canal bank, they're suggesting that. I'd like to hear more reports on that, to be quite honest. I was going to ask whether that is possible. So, road, canal, and then put what you said about under the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act. Are we putting these issues? I know Gain is very passionate about this, and I agree with her, to be honest, about having extra retail, but is this really the right place? I really do not think so. It should be in the town. If we could find a location, let me say what I'm going to say. If you go to Abergavenny, and I said this last time we had this, they put the oldie in the town. Why haven't we got it in the town? Well, because it's an obvious place to put it. We wouldn't be having this argument, discussion, whatever you want to call it, about putting it on roads. It's the worst possible place to put it, on the motorway roundabout. My other great fear, and I've heard colleagues saying about it when they talk about this, not in general, of course, we're not, is this roundabout's got other bits of land on it. So if we have an oldie on this side, what are we going to have over there and on this bit of land? I dread to think. What's the potential? This is out-of-town developments. Go down and look at Newport and the problems we had down there. I want to point this out. You think you've got a failing town there now? An officer's pointed that out. Go and have a look at what happened in Newport. I have to spell this out, I'm afraid, because at the end of the day, if you've got oldie there, you can have somebody else there, and we end up with out-of-town. The one thing we have not had in Torvine is an out-of-town development. Now, you've got a wonderful town there. We hope we can get some redevelopment. You put that oldie there, they'll all be in there. Can I have some comments on that lot, please?
Direct to comment. Craig, thank you. You? No? Claire.
Well, in terms of going through the issues, we've already touched upon the access by foot and cycleway or not. In terms of the flood risk, the Canal and River Trust have set out their position. It's not a new issue. It was raised with the previous application. It's not progressed, so a precautionary approach is being taken until such time as more information is provided to give us the confidence that is no longer an issue. I both personally and professionally agree with you in terms of Newport. Torvine has no out-of-town retail stores, and our existing centre in Cwmbran is thriving because of that. The comments from the Pontypool Town Centre manager and markets manager shows that the public investment in the market and the events is paying off. We're increasing the footfall through that intervention, but Pontypool is still in a precarious situation, and as officers we feel that this would undermine that public investment, because that people would use the out-of-town location for Aldi because it's convenient, but as you've identified in Newport, when you have lots of out-of-town shops, ultimately it's the town centre that misses out on that. So I think I don't think I can add anything else other than I agree with a lot of what you've said. My report says that, but ultimately it's for members to take the view based on all the information that's before you. You've had the officer's recommendation, and it's over to you, really.
Right, Neil. All right. A member brought it up. Claire was entitled to give her view on what was just said, and please don't shout out. No, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people before you, Gaynor. The next person on my list is John.
I would like to reiterate the eloquent words of the Highways officer. We as councillors also have a duty of care towards the people of Torvine. What worries me is we've got a significant roundabout with a significant accident record. I travel past that roundabout twice a day in work. I've had people running across in front like children, a glorious game of chicken, it looks like. This is in no way going to help that situation. I'm not really interested in what is bringing extra traffic and extra people to this area. I'm just, well, I couldn't forgive myself if something happened, and I voted for this. This came up the first time. It's why I voted against it, and it's why I'll be voting against it this time. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Next on the list is Gwyn.
Firstly, I'd like to say that I've talked to a lot of people in my ward. My mind wasn't made up till I came in here. I took both sides of the argument. I've had a read of social media. I've listened to all the arguments from them. I will most certainly vote for this. The idea, the reason being that a lot of people in my ward shop in Brynmawr or Abergavenny. There's no opposition to Tesco's, which got nothing to do with it, as my fellow councillor there, Neil, said. But if people are going to go out to town to shop in a supermarket, fetch that supermarket to Pontypool. And as regards the other one about the traffic, right, saying crossing the traffic out of McDonald's and going around, what's the difference between people coming up from Cwmbran and going right round the roundabout and pulling to McDonald's? I use that roundabout probably more than anybody in here. You know, I just categorically state that, and the only actions on that roundabout is idiots. It's people in the wrong lanes and taking the wrong corners. If you get in your right lanes, there's not a problem on that roundabout. The problem with the roundabout is it's the people on the roundabout. Right, my other point is public transport. I can assure you that there's going to be a stage carriage operator out there who will willingly detour into there. But there's money to be made, they will do it. There's local firms here. You've got people like Stagecoach, you've got Phil Amslaw. I'm sure one of them would certainly come into this area. The other thing is, like I said about the competition, industrial. Where are you going to get any industry to come into that area? You're going to leave it dormant for 20 years, like Neil said? Or do you want somebody to come in, employ people, Torvine, unemployment? The other point is flooding. Now, anybody knows me knows I'm a bit of an historian like Neil. That canal, a canal finds its own level. It doesn't fill up and flood. A canal, various points along that canal, there's overflows, overruns. So, don't come to me with flooding, and whether the canal board say it. I walked that canal, I've studied that canal, I've photographed that canal. That's a no-go, and yes, no loss. Crossing the carriageway, if children cross the carriageway, that's chicken. That's nothing to do with Aldi's. I personally use that. I have never, ever seen anybody walk across that carriageway. If they are, they're suicidal. And I cannot see how they can get across that carriageway without being hit. Another point. Unfortunately, in this chamber, it's a democracy. We've all got our own opinions, and we all make our own decisions. But I say that I am voting for this for the simple reason is that we need another supermarket in Europe to stop people going out to this area and taking money out with them. People in my ward have said to me, Gwen, we've got to have it. I said, well, I'm not making my mind up, so I come in here and hear both sides of it. I have heard nothing in here from anybody, that side or this side, that's made me change my mind. I say, let's go for it.
Right. Did you want to come in before, Richard? I forgot. Do you want to come in now?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
I think we said that we did this a year ago, didn't we? We made a decision on the Aldi application to refuse it. And I think I made the points at that time that we are operating under a policy that is backed by a big evidence base and a big retail evidence base. And we are not the experts on retail. We have consulted with experts on retail to produce that policy, first of all, that we've been operating for many, many years, and a policy that's been used to defend other out-of-town stores in the past. We've used that same consultant on this particular application to look at it in detail. The report is a considered report based on all of that information. The recommendation is entirely in accordance with the policy that this council has adopted. To go against that, I think Councillor Ashley made the point, to go against that policy, which is what we would be doing if we approved this, would set a precedent for future. I don't know how then we would deal with future out-of-town stores in terms of that policy which applies to the whole borough. So this is a democracy and members have the right to make whatever decision they like, but I would caution you to look carefully at the report, to consider the comments that have been made, consider the policy, which is in line with national policy as well. This is a policy that most councils will operate before coming to that decision, because the implications on Pontypool and for future stores like this will be dictated to by what happens in this committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. Jason, you're next on the list.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We've talked about setting precedent here. I would regard the site in Cwmbran, the B&Q site, as being out of town centre. So from my humble point of view, I would say that the precedent has already been set for something similar. The one thing that we haven't really talked about, Gwyn did touch on it, was the number of jobs that are being created. Are we aware of many developments north of Cwmbran that are going to create 40 high-quality, well-paid jobs over the next 3 to 5 years?
In terms of the B&Q development in Cwmbran, I disagree with you. That would fall within the 300-metre walking distance that makes it not out of centre. There's a footpath link from that site into the town centre. In terms of the jobs, the Aldi proposal for 40 jobs, as stated, actually equates to 28 full-time equivalents when you take into account seasonal and temporary, the nature of work in those stores. That has to be balanced against the views of the existing industrial users of that site. There's an existing company employing 150 full-time manufacturing jobs that says the introduction of a retail use will compromise the logistics of his business, which may result in them having to relocate. There's also another company who has expressed an interest in moving to Skewfields to expand. They're currently based in Lantarnham. They're looking to move to Skewfields to expand their business, and they have also said that the introduction of a retail use on that site would have to make them reconsider that in the medium to longer term. So if members are looking at the jobs, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but you need to balance the existing industrial occupiers, especially when the planning policy says that industrial land should be kept for industrial uses, unless it can be clearly demonstrated that there's no conflict with the criteria of that policy, one of which it should not have any detrimental impact on the operation of existing businesses, and you've got an existing business employing 150 people who say logistically they're incompatible.
It sounds like there's a lot of ifs, buts, maybes from people on site or thinking of coming to site, and they might do this or we might do that, but what we have in our hand is a firm proposal for those 40 jobs for people in Torfaen, and I think we'd be fools to turn them down.
Right, Gaynor, you're next.
Could anybody out there tell me about any valley town that's not struggling? Or any major town that's not struggling? So you can't blame Aldi's going down there would be affected in that town, because nearly every high street in this country is suffering. And if you don't approve this, then people will continue to bypass the town and go straight down to Cwmbran or Abergavenny. And that is why we are struggling. It's because they're going where they can have a choice. And in Pontypool, they haven't got a choice, and that's why they don't shop in the town.
Alan's next.
Thank you, Chair.
A minute, I think the officer wanted to come in on that.
Yeah, except that high streets around the UK are struggling across the UK due to internet shopping and other issues, but you've got a struggling town centre here. It's worse than the national average, and bringing in an Aldi store to an out-of-town location that isn't accessible by foot, I think is going to make the situation in Pontypool worse and cause further exacerbation of the problems rather than helping the town centre.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to explore this issue of the flooding, really. Natural Resources Wales, they've not got a problem with this. It's purely the canal, I understand. And then only if there's some catastrophic breach of the canal embankment. So again, we're talking ifs, maybes. And the point I want to make is, isn't it the responsibility of the Canal and River Trust to ensure that that doesn't happen? Aren't we just giving them an excuse to sort of not maintain that embankment? I don't see that we can kind of not develop that site purely on the off chance, which that's what it is, that there will be at some point in the future some catastrophic breach of the embankment, which is what we seem to be talking about here. There doesn't seem to be a flood risk as such to me. It's a very low probability, I would suggest. Thank you.
Right, I think Claire will come in to answer this.
You're right and you're not right. There is a flood risk. Ask anybody who lives in Gilwan what happens when a canal breaches, they won't think that the flood risk is insignificant by any stretch. On one hand, you are right. There is an expectation and an onus on the Canal River Trust to maintain that waterway in a safe condition. However, it is also incumbent on the local planning authority, when making decisions on where development should be located, that they do that in the full knowledge of any flood risk that gives. The existing site, the rugby playing fields, are already prone to flood risk. That's no different. The fact that it hasn't flooded is a good thing, but we can never say never. Planning policy sets out a number of tests. You would be introducing members of the public to a situation of potential flood risk. As the report says, as officers, we don't think this is necessarily an insurmountable reason, but ultimately there's not enough information in front of us for us to be confident that that risk has been fully appraised and mitigated, which is why the Canal and River Trust, which is why it was pulled last month, because the applicant submitted an addendum to their own flood consequences assessment, and their own submission shows that that site will be at risk of flooding in the event of a breach. So yes, it is the Canal and River Trust responsibility, but the canal is a flood risk, that is a fact. Canals have breached, and that's been a problem. So in making decisions to introduce development into those areas, the proper due diligence needs to be taken before that is positively determined. The Canal and River Trust have set have open door policy with the applicants. They think that their modelling information is incorrect, but they're happy to share their data to work that up in more detail. And the applicants themselves think that there is a technical solution which may involve floor level issues, or it may have an implication for bunding, that sort of thing. But at the moment, based on the information that we have, Canal and River Trust are not satisfied that that flood risk has been satisfactorily assessed and mitigated for.
Thank you. Faye and then Stuart. I was going to say we've come to the end of the questions. Okay, Faye and then Stuart.
I would just like to ask, as we know that the people of Pontypool are desperate for more competition and Aldi's to go somewhere up there, have we been able to proactively look at other sites that would be better for Aldi to be situated on, and have we been able to suggest that to Aldi, and are there other sites near the town centre that perhaps they could use?
Come in with this.
Yeah, well, when the previous application report came to you, there was a suggestion there may have been a site in Pontypool that could have been done. The office building on that has been sold, as the report identifies. Since the previous application was refused, Aldi's haven't come to the council to discuss any alternative options with the council. They've continued to progress with this site. They've ruled out the Mamilid site, as you can see from the report. They haven't had any active consultation or comments with the council about anything else in terms of the application. They've just gone ahead and done a survey and resubmitted the application.
Thank you.
Reminded of the fact that that canal site is actually the biggest single pond, or one of the biggest single ponds on the whole of the British Canal system. It's actually 30 odd miles long. So if it does get breached, there's one heck of a lot of water. I don't like to disagree with Gwyn, but there's actually quite a flow on it. I can't remember whether it's 4 miles now or something, but if you talk to the council's officer, it flows, I believe it's Gilwyn Langwyn, right through to 5 Locks. It actually, the water, it flows on it, it's not static. So that's probably why they're actually, I know because I've served on the canal and Canal Regeneration Trust. The reason that is important is because streams come in at one end and go out the other, as Gwyn said earlier. But the important thing about that particular thing, it's a distribution system, as anybody works on it, is how it keeps it topped up. Is it's 30 miles long. You don't, without a flow on it, and that's why if you go on the other end of it, there's boards. So that is the reason why they're worried about it breaching. If you look all the way up at the bridge holes, there's actually boards that put across. If it does breach, and when it did breach, they could dam it off. So any breach on that canal does happen, as you said earlier. It's not something that doesn't happen. It's happened further up, and it can happen. So it's not if, it's something, they do worry about it, and if you get substance on it. Sorry, at the point of information, I just wonder whether, whether we are mindful of that fact, because, it's a likelihood.
Would you want to comment on that?
Well, I'm just repeating myself a little bit, really. I mean, the Canal and River Trust have set out their position. Yeah. Our drainage officer's comments are also there for you to appraise. Ultimately, it's a decision for members based on the situation as currently exists.
I've still got 3 on the list. Jason next, then Janet, then Gaynor, then Gwyn.
Thank you, Chair. I might be a bit ahead of myself, but I've heard no real argument today that can't be mitigated through solid engineering management of the canal, site traffic management in terms of the flow of traffic. So I was going to raise a motion to support the people of Pontypool and reject the officer's recommendation, and I think we should move to approve this application.
Richard needs to come in on that. There are people who still want to speak. I don't know whether Janet?
Just a comment, really. I came in with an open mind, and I'm still more confused than ever based on the information our officers have given us, which leads me to concerns of the safety, but also bearing in mind that the need for provision of an Aldi's for the people in all over the borough who are low-cost incomes. So I'm really still struggling on this, Chair.
Yeah. Gwyn? No, Gaynor then Gwyn, sorry. It's out of order.
Yes, well, my colleague here was saying, did they look for another site, and maybe in the town? Now, in Cwmbran, you've got to walk from Aldi's car park across the road. I was right, there's a crossing there, but by the time you walk from there and into town, and we had a site that was as close by, in Pontypool, to do exactly the same as the outlet of the Aldi's in Cwmbran, you'd still be accusing it of destroying the town. So what is the difference? 2 minutes down the bypass, or within 10 minutes walking distance of the town? What is the difference? If you were accusing it of destroying the town, it would make no difference whatsoever if there was a big enough site for it on the edge of the town.
Does anybody want to answer that?
It's to do with the propensity for link trips. The closer that is in walking distance, the more likely people are to do link trips rather than get in their car and drive back. That's the site on Skewfields is all perpetuated on use of that site by the car and driving home rather than link trips and using other services in Pontypool town centre.
Gwyn, and this will be the last one.
Right. I really believe this issue with the canal is scaremongering, because if there's a fear that that site is going to flood, I feel sorry for the people living south of that canal all the way down to Cwmbran. Nothing was said when they built on Pilkingtons. The canal is right by the side, all them houses are down there. You go down the canal, you've got Griffithstown, you've got Pilkingtons rugby, football, all on that side. So I think that the executives that is scaremongering. To say that canal is going to flood, yeah, you could have a plane landing, crash down in 2 minutes. Are we going to hypothetically think these things? Come on, let's have a bit of reason, let's have a bit of censure. And I say, yes, let's go for it. Let's look after the people who voted us in. They're the people that's put us where we are. Let's do what they want out there. I've taken everything into consideration here. Listen to them out there, came in here with an open mind. Listen there, nothing that was said there have convinced me to change my mind. That needs to go there. Everybody want to go to Aldi's from north of the borough. I'm sorry, it's democracy again. The ones down the south, they've already got their Aldi's. Right? But it's democracy. This is a council chamber. And I say, my people in Snatchwood Ward do not want to go to Abergavenny or go to Cwmbran to go to Aldi's. We need competition in this. And if you're going to check away 40 jobs, that's enough.
Just a quick one, Chair. Could I have a recorded vote on this as well, please?
Vote? Yeah. No, nobody else has come up. I needed 6 people to respond straight away, and that didn't happen. No, it's too late now. That wasn't for you to say.
I'll ask again, could I have a recorded vote, please?
Yeah. Okay, we'll have a recorded vote.
Can I have the motion, please, as I've got these first on this?
Richard is going to come in and explain a few things to us before we go into the vote.
Yeah, only procedural. As you know, the recommendation is for refusal, so there's no conditions here, and I presume that members would want the store conditioned. There's also a number of offers from Aldi that could be incorporated into the Section 106 agreement, which is improved footpath links, a community transport subsidy, and the access to the rugby club. Now, members' choice on that is that we can either bring a report back with the proposed conditions and the Section 106, or you can authorise officers to negotiate the 106 and conditions and issue the decision under delegated powers, which means there'd be no reason to come back for committee. The only other thing is in terms of the reason number 4, which relates to the flooding, as you can see, we've said, as an informative underneath that, is that we think that that could be resolved by further negotiation. The applicants themselves feel that it could be resolved. So it's whether members want us to negotiate on that as well and resolve that issue. What I would say is, in resolving that issue, it may be that the store may be affected by that. It may need to be changed in some way. The access to the rugby club may not be able to go ahead if there's mitigation works required. In those circumstances, if members felt that we had delegated powers to do that, but there were significant changes to those proposals, I would have to bring that back to members as well, in any event. Does that, so the choices for members is that you can make your decision today, you can certainly make the decision on the application, but you need to make sure that we also put conditions on and negotiate a 106 agreement if you want those proposals incorporated, and you need to make a decision on that reason number 4 if you want officers to negotiate with the applicant. And that either means a report coming back to you, or you give us authorisation to issue the decision once all that has been resolved.
Amendment, Chair, that if the decisions goes and we recommend approval with conditions as approved by our officers, I would feel happy with that.
Can I just
yes.
Just to clarify, do you mean, is your motion that officers are authorised to go and do that and then issue without coming back to committee, or
I'd rather you come back to committee, please.
Is there a seconder for that amendment?
Chair, can I just make a comment as well? If we're allowing officers to negotiate the agreement, that we consider the need for changing rooms for the rugby club on site as well in that negotiation. Is that possible?
There'll be a delay because Rachel has to get the names of everyone who's here today for a recorded vote. Okay? Right, Richard is going to clarify the situation. Thank you, Richard.
So I think what members are asking, in the event that the application is approved, that you would want us to negotiate on the Section 106 agreement in terms of the offers in the report. The only thing I was querying is, I think changing rooms came up. That's not what's been offered by Aldi. No, I think it was... so that's not something that's on offer.
Could be part of the negotiation under the 106.
It's very doubtful that we could justify that as part of the 106 agreement. I mean, Aldi are here, so they've heard you, but I think that in terms of our remit, it would be negotiating on the 3 offers that they've made. It would be difficult for us to do anything further than that, I would suggest.
I think Aldi have heard how important we regard the change rooms and that rugby club to be in the community, so hopefully they will have heard
that may need to be done outside the Section 106 agreement, but yes, they've heard you. Secondly, that we will suggest conditions to members and bring a report back on the Section 106 and the conditions. The third thing is because the applicants are suggesting that they could overcome the flooding issue, that we approach that with them and with the Canal and Rivers Trust to try and get a solution and, again, bring that back to members. So in the future, you'll be making a substantive decision today, but you will then be looking to vote on the Section 106 conditions and whatever happens in terms of that last reason. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay.
Right. Janet?
my proposition, Jane.
Pardon?
That's exactly what Richard said as well.
Yes, yes, yes. Yes.
Thank you. Under this policy S8, which is termed as section 106, there is a paragraph K which allows for improvements to the canal. So couldn't we look to mitigate the flood through that clause?
I think because there's a responsibility on the Canal and Rivers Trust anyway to look after the canal, the issue here for Aldi is if it did happen, that what have they got in place to protect the people that would be visiting their store? So I don't think we can ask Aldi to actually do any engineering works to the canal. It's really all about if it did happen, what is the contingency? So I think on that basis we'd be negotiating that issue.
Just to add to that point, you're right in terms of the policy. If you actually read on to criteria M, flood defence measures to mitigate the risk of flooding is a listed item as a section 106 obligation. So I think as part of the discussions with the Canal and River Trust through the fullness of time, once that modelling work is completed and based on the advice we get at that point, I would envisage that mitigation will be required, and it would be a sort of tripartite discussion between the developers, Canal and River Trust and ourselves as to the form that takes, and that could very well be subject to the 106 agreement alongside the other items.
Right. Are we taking the amendment first? That's what usually happens. Right. Can you repeat the amendment so members know what they're voting for?
Right. If the proposal is accepted, we accept it with conditions on section 106 and the other three items which Richard has explained, which means that the decisions will come back to full planning council.
Right, we're voting on that first. It's been seconded. Shall we have a show of hands? Right. Does everybody except three of us? Okay. Can you put your hands up again, please? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Is that? Right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10. Yeah. Those against? And abstentions? No, everyone else is abstaining. Right. We vote now to approve the application against the officer's recommendations. No, we're not having a show of hands. Rachel will call the names out and we say for or against. Can you call me up down the line?
So it's for the application or against the application?
We are voting for the application. To approve the application, to approve it. That's against the officer's recommendation. But we are voting to approve it now. Okay. No, there aren't any recommendation. The recommendation, that's refused.
No, I think she's referring to the that was already been voted on. The conditions in the section.
Oh, yes. Yeah, the amendment is done. Yes. That'll be part of it. Yes, sorry. I couldn't hear. You didn't put your mic on, did you? Okay, right.
To be clear, if you approve this, you for the application. If you refuse against, then you're against the application.
It's over to Rachel now. She will call your names out and you say whether you're for or against.
Councillor Ashley?
Against.
Councillor Constance?
For.
Councillor Evans?
For.
Councillor Haller?
Against.
Councillor James?
4.
Councillor Jenkins?
4.
Councillor Faye Jones?
4.
Councillor Janet Jones?
4.
Councillor O'Connell?
4.
Councillor Overton?
4.
Councillor Slade?
I'm for it.
Councillor Waite? Councillor Parish?
Against.
There's 10 members voting for and 3 members voting against.
This application has been approved. Right, we'll move on to agenda item 8, which is application number 18. Oh.
Chair? Chair? Can I just have 2 minutes?
Right, I'll adjourn for 5 minutes only. Right, we're starting the meeting again. We're now on item 8 on the agenda, and it's application number 18/P/0660 FUL. The proposal is construction of 2.1 metre wide footpath and stepped access from the cycle path down towards Cwmpredore School and out onto Waynfi. The site address is Cwmpredore Primary School, Waynfi, Pont Newydd, Pontypool. Before we have a presentation, I'm going to put you over to Polly, our legal advisor.
I think Councillor Haller has reminded me that he wants to declare a personal and prejudicial interest in this application because he's in the process of being nominated to be a governor of Cwmpredore School. He's therefore going to leave the chamber and he's not going to take any part in the debate or the decision. Is that correct, Councillor Haller?
Thank you, that's correct.
Right. Thank you. It's over to Claire again for a short presentation. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Chair. You felt the sound of my voice today, members. I do apologise. Okay, all the updates to the report again is reflection on the references to PPW, Planning Policy Wales 9 in the report. It's been superseded by Planning Policy Wales 10, which came out last week. The main change really is Planning Policy Wales 10 has really emphasised the active travel priority for the Welsh Government in terms of the Active Travel Wales Act and related design guidance on facilitating accessible and healthy environments and minimising reliance on the car, which is ultimately the main change, greater emphasis on that. Otherwise the report is as it is. So this is a section profile of, it's a combination of ramps and steps to facilitate both cycle and pedestrian access to the school from the existing national cycle network that exists. So, as you can see here, this is the cycle path here. This is the school at the bottom. There's about a 14-metre height difference between the school grounds and the cycle path. It's quite steep. Hence the combination of sort of steps and ramps to navigate that difference in levels. It is in a 1 to 20 gradient, so it complies with all the modern requirements that Paul knows more about than I do, I'm sure. This is the tree removal sort of plan, and then this is the planting guidelines. So basically a lot of trees are coming out to construct the development, and then new trees are going back in to soften the appearance in this location. And if I go on a bit, there's mitigation planting down here as well. So section of trees coming out here, some going back in once the development is constructed, and additional tree planting on the lower section here. Sorry, it's a bit dark, but that's the red circle there, just to highlight it is quite a substantial woodland setting at the moment, and as the report refers, that will be significantly opened up, I suppose, in landscape terms, but the development includes mitigation to offset that. This is the cycle path. So these are the sorts of trees that are going to be coming out. They're mainly semi-mature broadleaf. The ecology and landscape impact report that accompanies the application sets out all the usual assessment in terms of birds, mammals, reptiles, etc. If you can't see here, but this is a view from Pantygasseg, okay? And actually you can't see the school because it is very well nestled within that sort of landscape. But there's like a blue container just in here, which is the builders were using when they were constructing the extension, just as a reference point. So the cycle path sort of goes up at this level, and then the school is sort of lower down. So it's this sort of section of trees here that would be taken out to facilitate the access to the school. That's it.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. Stuart, you want to come in?
Yeah, I've got a feeling I've been to this school looking at what they've adopted. Looks okay, actually. My only reservation is, and somebody said to me earlier about it, which is your subject. I got a conflict in here, usually between cycle path and tree. What type of trees are they? And none of them are TPOs by the look of it. It's sort of scrubby stuff, isn't it? It's by the look of it. And what are we putting in there? Because that's a question. It looks okay to me because getting kids cycling, getting them down that cycle path is the important thing from our point of view. But what we're putting in is always a big question. I love asking that when we go to visits, as everybody knows. But if you're putting a sufficient... And it's good we're putting this stuff in because as per the previous thing, which was controversial, we do need to get them out there walking and doing all that because it's important. So there's a couple of questions there.
Sorry, they're semi-mature broadleaf trees, less than 40 years old, mainly ash, oak and birch, but with some younger hawthorns, beech and field maple, so it's a bit of a mix of everything. It is a well-established woodland area. In terms of area, there's 2,500 square metres being felled, which sounds a lot. It is a lot, but the 800 square metres are being replanted back in the same section, and then the additional deficit is being planted on that lower section. So in habitat terms, it's a like for like really in terms of what's coming out and what's going in. The number, size of species, there's a method statement included with the mitigation, so that would all be agreed with the arboricultural officer and the ecologist prior to going in. And then there's, from a landscape point of view, it comes down to the management of that. There's a condition recommended, condition 4, which requires a 3-year aftercare and maintenance programme to make sure that those trees establish, so that in the longer term, the impact on the landscape will be less dramatic than it certainly will be a dramatic impact in the short term when you take out a large section of trees, but with the appropriate aftercare and maintenance that's built in, and there's funding as part of that to ensure that happens, and in the longer term the landscape impact will be reduced, but in habitat mitigation terms it's a like for like in terms of area.
Have Have you got Steve, is it Al Slovines managing it, or is it a contractor?
I think it's a contractor doing the works, but there's a detailed method statement that's been drawn up by our officers, our ecologist and our tree officer.
Any questions from anyone else or comments? Gwyn?
Yeah, I'd like to ask you, will they do a thorough check on it? Because Comforter School is on the site of an old colliery, as we all are aware, and obviously going up there, that's where the coal was, going on that. So hopefully they will do a study of the ground underneath there.
I think that's part of the unknowns at this stage, I suppose. I don't think they know what condition the ground is in until they get in there, and that's why the detailed number and size of species are yet to be determined, because they need to do some further assessment of the ground conditions to see what species will best survive in that environment based on, once they've cleared the working area to get in, they can do that investigative work and make sure that the mitigation then reflects those ground conditions.
Thank you. Anyone? Benny?
I'd like to move the officer's recommendation for approval.
Seconder? Yes, you've seconded it. You're ready to vote? This is for the officer's recommendation for approval. That looks unanimous to me. Anyone against? Any abstentions? No, that was unanimous. This application has been approved. Yeah, we'll wait for Councillor Haller to come back in. Right. Once Councillor Haller's in his seat, we'll go to agenda item 9. Right, application number 18/P/0706 FUL. The proposal is for reconfiguration of existing waste transfer station, bulking, sorting and baling used for household recycling, including extension of external yard, change of use from open grassed area, and the site is Unit 7 and 8, T Coch Distribution Centre, T Coch, Cwmbran, and Mrs. Helen Smith is going to give us a presentation. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you, Chair. Just an update on the report. Since it was published, obviously we've had Plan Policy Wales 10 come into effect, but I confirm that there's no changes that affects this application. We also had a late representation from Natural Resources Wales. They advised some additional conditions regarding drainage and contamination, which we can add on. We have the contamination conditions, but some needs just changing to take their views into account. They also advise that further information should be submitted in relation to the methodology of how the applicant surveyed the trees in terms of assessing the bat-risk potential of those trees. This information has been submitted, and our ecologist is satisfied with that methodology. Yes, so this application relates to the existing waste transfer station on Unit 7 and 8 T Coch Distribution Centre. The site is currently operated on behalf of Torfaen County Borough Council for the curbside collection, sorting and bulking and baling. At present, this is the unit here. They have an external area here where they do some sorting and of materials. This proposal is for reconfiguring internally for some additional bulking and baling facilities, and the use of this area to the rear of the building for a replacement yard area with improved facilities, which have got sorting bays here. These are for cardboard, plastics, cans and glass. Access will come off the existing industrial estate road. There'll be a weighbridge and some skip areas here. The proposal also includes 2 new roller shutter doors in the rear elevation to serve the yard area to help improve circulation of the collection vehicles. The site at present is an open area of open space of just amenity grassland. It's tucked behind the unit. Here we have Cwmbran Drive and a large mature tree landscaping buffer here. This area here is of small-scale trees, a mixture of ash, cherry, goat willow, Scots pine and sycamore. These will be removed to take into account, and it was these trees that the NRW wanted further clarification on, which our ecologists are satisfied. This area will remain as a landscaped area. Although we are losing some grassland, it is, I'll show you some photographs in a minute, but it is just general amenity grassland with low ecological value, and due to its location to the rear of the properties and in between this mature landscaping belt, it's not visible from the outside area. So here we have, this is the front of the building where the vehicles come to the access in here and they come out here. And this is where they will access into the new yard area. These are the adjacent units. And this is just another view of the front elevation. This is the area of grassland where the yard will be created. The new doors will be in these elevations. And this is the group of low-value trees which are to be removed. We do have some mitigation planting for these trees along the boundaries of the yard area. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Are there any questions? Nobody's got a question or a comment? Anybody want to move?
I'll move the officer's recommendation again then.
Is there a seconder? Thank you. Right. We're voting on the officer's recommendation to approve. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, that's unanimous, I think. Anyone against? Any abstentions? That was unanimous. That application has been approved. And that brings us to the end of our agenda for today. Thank you all for your attendance. I wish you compliments of the season and hope you all have a happy and prosperous, healthy and peaceful new year.